Hillary Clinton is embarking upon the speech trail, and she kicked off her journey today in San Francisco, speaking in front of about 1,000 members of the American Bar Association. And her focus was on voting rights, and in particular, she took aim at the recent Supreme Court ruling that struck down Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. Take a listen.
Legislators in North Carolina have pushed through a bill that reads like the greatest hits of voter suppression. Restricted early voting, no more same-day registration, or extending voting hours to accommodate long lines, stricter photo ID requirements that disqualify those issued by colleges or public assistance agencies, and it goes on and on. These are all changes that would have required federal approval under the Voting Rights Act, but now can go forward without scrutiny. By invalidating preclearance, the Supreme Court has shifted the burden back onto citizens facing discrimination and those lawyers willing to stand with them.
And speaking about North Carolina there, too, and by the way, let me correct myself, that was a speech that she gave on Monday. But Sabrina, do you have any idea why this is the issue that she's chosen to hone in on now?
Well, there are several issues that she's going to continue to hone in on, and certainly foreign policy and the country's standing on the global stage are going to be key issues that she will talk about, even if we haven't seen it just yet. That is her area of expertise, of course, as former Secretary of State. But there's a lot of conversation around whether or not Congress will address the Supreme Court's ruling on voting rights, which was, of course, seen as essentially gutting the essence of the Voting Rights Act, which Congress had reauthorized as recently as 2006, I believe the exact year was. And there's been, of course, concern as to whether House Republicans are going to be willing to pass any sort of sweeping voting rights legislation and ensure that that certain communities, essentially minorities, are protected under the new rule, under the verdict that came down a couple of months ago. I think that because it's a very topical issue, it's not surprising, especially going into an election, to want to address how that election might take place and whether or not everyone will have the right to vote, will have a fair shot at casting a vote at the ballot. And of course, being a Democratic candidate, that kind of fits very well under the party's championing of voting rights. It's certainly within the platform, especially as a lot of Republican state legislatures that are the ones who are pushing a legislation that would restrict voting rights, especially in those states that previously required pre-clearance from the Justice Department to make any changes. So it's not too surprising, but I think you might also see her switch to foreign policy in not too long.